So here we have the Razer Tartarus V2 gaming keypad. This thing is one of the greatest purchases I've ever made, both for gaming and for just using in general on my PC. I absolutely love it. I always had issues with, if I just grab my keyboard here, with playing video games, using WASD for walking and control for crouch and space for jump. I mean, look, it's fine, but a keyboard was designed for typing, and then using it for games was an afterthought. So while that's quite comfortable, there are certain things that you need to reach for that you really have to stretch your wrist and hands in weird ways. And different keyboards have a different offset between different rows. So when you get a new keyboard, you often have to figure out a new way to get comfortable, where you take something like this and it's in a perfect grid formation. So you don't have to think about where you're moving your fingers to. So you can program these to whatever you like, but most people will use this as WASD or WASD here. And you still have control and shift or what you would use for crouch and run, but everything's in straight lines. So it's so much more comfortable for your hands, and you don't have to ever look to know where you're stretching your fingers to. You just know that you're going down or you're going up diagonally. It's just so much easier to get your head around it and not ruin your game in the middle of a game by fumbling and not knowing where to put your fingers. And you have so many keys to choose from here. It's really, really nice. Now there is on the 13 key a little raised part to help you locate just by feel, which is good. And then you have a mouse wheel here. Now that can be clicked in and out as well. So you have one option to click and then up and down, of course, which you use for changing weapons or cycling through different things, depending what game you're playing. And then you have a button here, which I believe this was made for people to use in place of the space key, so using that for jump. But personally, I've found it's much more comfortable to use this bottom one here for jumping. So you tap it just like you did with the space key, but each to their own. And then, of course, there is the D-pad. Now, this D-pad does come with a little plastic insert to turn this into a round joystick. And some people have used this for walking around, but I find because it's kind of offset, where forwards is sort of that direction, it feels a bit weird trying to use that to steer. I'm much more comfortable using WASD, but I do like to use the 4 directions. So I've removed the joystick part, and these 4 directions I use as 4 different options, which can all be set in the options menu with this device. Really, really cool. The other thing here is this plate removes, and there are 2 different positions depending on your hand size. So I have it on the smaller hand size. Even though I have relatively large hands, I find it more comfortable because I can reach the top keys very easily. So I prefer to use these as W, A, S, and D at the top, and then I can stretch all the way down to the bottom if needed to these bottom 4 keys. Whereas I could have it a bit lower and use these, but then you have to do quite a stretch to get to the top. So I much prefer it that way. But again, each to their own. Now, I've been using this for several years. Before this, I had another Razer gaming pad, the original Tartarus, and absolutely loved it. But it did have 1 row less keys, so I ended up upgrading to the V2, and yeah, absolutely fantastic. But I don't just use this for gaming. I also use this in my video editing process. So I have different profiles, which you can see there's 3 profiles on the side you can easily switch between, but you can have as many profiles as you like saved in the settings on your computer. And I have a setup for Photoshop, I have a setup for Adobe Premiere, and different software that I find I'm doing repetitive movements in, I will try and set up macros or specific keybinds for that software. Really, really cool. And as you can see, it's got RGB. I'm not a huge fan of RGB. I have it off most of the time, but there's lots of cool settings you can play around with if you like that sort of thing. So yeah, Highly, highly, highly recommend it. It will improve your gameplay and also just general use of software if you want to use it in video editing and that type of thing. So yeah, enjoy.